And now let's start with Chesar. So, today we want to give you a good introduction to Chesar. The objective of today are really to provide you an overview for some of the basic functionality of Chesar. Of course, we can't show you the full functionalities because we have one-day training, and usually we do our basic training in 2 days. So today we have a bit shrinked in 1 day. But in any case, we hope at least the main messages should be clear to you. So we want to, with this set of exercise, we want to demonstrate to you a complete process from the import of data from Euclid and to the generation of the chemical safety report and the exposure scenario for communication. And of course, one of the main points of today is to let you know where to find more information, both on Chesar and on the tools that Chesar uses. And of course, today, our exercises will be based on the learning by doing practice, which means that you will be physically exposed to the exercise and you will be doing everything by yourself, with few exceptions. Okay. To do so, we have a quite tough and packed agenda. So in the morning, beside this welcome and introduction, we will go through a presentation made by Connie on the general principle and workflow of the application. Then we will go real with the exercises from the interaction with Euclid, so the getting started with Chesar and interaction with Euclid. Then we will go through the use description and use map, introduction to assessment. That will be a live demonstration, and that will conclude our morning. So a lot of things to do during the morning, so you will be happy to go for your coffee break, for sure. Then after the lunch, we have to do the environmental, worker, and consumer assessment, nothing else. So we will try to do everything in 2 hours. And of course, the export to Euclid and CSR generation. And the exposed scenario for communication document to be made out. Okay, our exercise, so the exercises that you will be doing today are based on the so-called Illustrative CSR example that was published the first time in 2012, together with an explanatory note. The purpose of the CSR example was and is to complement the ECHA guidance with something concrete. So you have really the files to play with and to look for. You have the commented CSR, the files and everything, so you can redo the exercise, or you can see the exercise, the illustrative example and compare it to the CSR. So again, it was made to support basically the registrants, but also to increase the common understanding within ECHA and between ECHA and the different stakeholders. And it has been very useful also for us to test the application because, of course, if you do an assessment completely from A to Z, then you go through the full application. So the starting point of the illustrative example was a real dossier. And in any case, so we had to do some modification to make it fit for purpose. And we have updated it in 2017. So we are really asking you to go to the website. You have the link indicated here and in the manual. So go there and have a look if you didn't yet. Okay, so we can go on because, again, our set of exercises, as I told you, is based on this illustrative CSR example. But it has been used more as an inspiration than else, meaning that we had to adapt it to fit our training purposes. And overall, for this training, we had to really cut a bit of pieces of the illustrative example. Now the substance is called SECHA training substance, and it's the substance with which you will be working the full day today. So be aware, so for the assessors that are in the room, be aware that the set of exercises is not fully consistent in itself, but we have tried to explain as much as possible in the notes. And of course, it's not complete, because, well, we will not go through the full life cycle of the substance. We will not assess everything. We will have some demonstration of uses assessed. Okay, and now I'm very happy to give the floor to Connie, that will give you the overview of Chesar. Thank you. Oops.
Okay, so before we actually go and do some exercises, I would like to give you a brief introduction on Chesar. For some of you, this may be very familiar already, but just to get everyone started on the same level. So if you have ever wondered what Chesar stands for, it stands for Chemical Safety Assessment and Reporting Tool, and it's a web application which has been developed here at SECHA to support registrants. It supports in carrying out the chemical safety assessment and making that into a chemical safety report, and also in generating the exposure scenarios for communication, which you can then annex to your extended safety data sheet. We have two versions available. There is a desktop version, which you install locally on your PC. There is also a server version available, which can be installed on a server, and then several people can access that from their own desktops. So you will be able to work in one database together with your colleagues. Very easy to download, it's free of charge, and very easy to install. So that at least should not be a limiting factor. Also good to mention, Chesar also supports the creation, export, and import of use maps. For those of you who are not familiar, it will come back a bit later what those are. But just to know that those features have also been incorporated. And at the bottom is the website where you can find Chesar and also the supporting documentation. To start off with, Chesar has a workflow which is captured basically in what we call the Chesar boxes. These boxes you will always see at the top of your screen as soon as you open Chesar. And those are also the boxes which we will be going through with you today. So a first introduction before we go in the exercise in a lot more detail on each of them. Box 1 is for the substances. So this is where you import your substance from Euclid and you define which substance you want to be assessing. Box 2 is about defining the uses for that substance. So where does it go in the supply chain? With information on the substance and the uses, you can then conduct your exposure assessment, which you do in box 3. Once you have finished doing your exposure assessment and risk characterization, you go to box 4, which is where you can generate and preview the chemical safety report. Then, if you also want to generate your exposure scenario for communication, you do that from box 5. And then box 6 and 7 are a bit more supporting boxes, so those are not really part of the workflow, but they provide support to the other boxes. Box 6 is very important for elements which you use in your assessment. It's the library. We won't go into details on that one today, but just so you know that it does exist. And box 7 is where you can do things related to users. So you can create users, give them roles, assign them to legal entities, things like that. We will see that one a little bit. A bit more details on this workflow. To be able to start your chemical safety assessment, the first thing you need is, of course, to know the properties of the substance that you will be assessing. You need some phys-chem properties, for instance, vapor pressure. You also need the results of your hazard assessment for the environment. Those will generally be PNEX, for human health, DNELs, and you need the PPT status. All that information is in Euclid. So you import that directly into Chesar in box 1. Box 1 also offers you some possibility to import and export full chemical safety assessments. So for instance, if you have done your assessment for one substance and you're going to assess a substance which is quite similar and has quite similar uses, you can actually export that information, import it in another substance, and the assessment will be pre-filled for you. You just have to make sure, of course, that it fits exactly with the new substance. So you have your substance, then the next thing you need to do is describe your uses. You can do that manually. There is also the possibility to import a use map developed by a sector association, if available in Chesar format. So once you have described your uses and you have your substance, then you can go on to your exposure assessment, which you do in box 3. For each use, you will need to define the conditions of use in each contributing activity. If you have imported the use map, then in many cases that will already be done for you in the form of a SPURC, SCED or a SWED, depending on whether you're in an environment, consumer or a worker scenario. Again, these will come back a little bit more later on. Where after you have had a look at these conditions of use, then you can do your quantitative exposure assessment and the risk characterization. Then it can be based on quantitative. So if you have a PNEC, for instance, for the environment, you determine the exposure and you compare the exposure to the PNEC to determine whether the use is safe. In some cases, for instance, if you have a skin irritant, you don't have a DNAL, but you have more the qualitative risk. In that case, you can also do the qualitative risk characterization, also in box 3. When you are reporting these conditions of use and other things, then you use, as I said before, box 6, which is the library containing all your conditions of use, your SPURCs, SWEDs, SCEDs, and also the standard phrases. And that box 6 also have an import-export functionality. Don't worry if it's going quite fast at the moment. This is exactly what we will be doing all together today. So just to give you a first overview of how everything fits together. So in box 3, you have then done your exposure assessment, but of course you want to report the results of that. So you go to box 4 and you generate your chemical safety report. There is a possibility to generate just the sections 9 and 10, which are the parts which you made with Chesar. But there is also the possibility to, first of all, export your uses and exposure data to Euclid, which will then pre-fill section 3.5 of the substance for you. And after you have done that, you can generate the full CSR, which basically takes chapters 1 to 8 generated by Euclid and combines them with chapters 9 and 10 generated by Chesar. And of course, not to forget, you have made the chemical safety reports, which you submit to us. But you also need to communicate the results to your downstream users. And that you do with the exposure scenarios for communication, which you can attach to your extended safety data sheet. And that's what you do in box 5. There is also the possibility there to export that information in an IT format, what we call ESCOM XML, so that there could also be digital exchange of the data. Okay, that's in very short the workflow which we will be taking you through today. A bit of terminology, just to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. If you have a substance, then it has a life cycle. It has a supply chain. It goes down that supply chain. And in that supply chain, you have uses. So a use can be manufacture, formulation, use at an industrial site, consumer use, professional use. All those are uses. And for each of those uses, you have contributing activities. You have at least one, usually one, sometimes more, for the environment. So they have a contributing activity name, and then you assign an ERC to that. For workers or consumers, depending on what you're dealing with, You have contributing activities as well, and in general there you have more than one. A worker at a site will not only unload the substance, they will also add it to a vessel where it is being mixed. So there are several activities which workers can do at a site, so you will have more than one contributing activity with the related PROC. So that's how your life cycle would look. Now, if you're going to exposure assessment, we have the terminology here. So your use, so manufacture, formulation, the use becomes an exposure scenario. And for each exposure scenario, you will conduct the assessment. The contributing activities which you defined become contributing scenarios. You have one or more contributing scenarios for the environment and one or more contributing scenarios for workers or for consumers, depending on what life cycle stage you're dealing with. For each contributing scenario, this is really where you perform your exposure assessment level at contributing scenario level. You first determine the releases, so how much goes to water, to air, to soil. And based on that, you then model the exposure to all the different environmental compartments and to man via the environment. For the contributing scenarios for the workers, they go straight to an exposure for workers. I hope this is a bit clarifying. So important to remember, you have uses with contributing activities. When you're conducting your exposure assessment, they become exposure scenarios with contributing scenarios. A little bit about the IT data flow. We see here in the center we have Chesar, which you use to conduct your chemical safety assessment. Then on the top we have the registrants Euclid database, which contains the substances imported into Chesar. On the other side, we have the so-called use map packages. There is a website on the ECHA web pages where all these use maps are hosted. So if you Google for ECHA use map, you will find it quite easily. And there you can find some Chesar files of use maps already available. You import that information in Chesar. You conduct your chemical safety assessments. You can use for that the built-in exposure estimation tools. Chesar contains a few tools. They are ECHA TRA for workers and consumers and EUSIS for the environment. But you also have the possibility to report the results of external exposure tools. For instance, if you have used ART, you have used Consexpo, you have used Stoffe Manager, whichever other tool, you can report the results. And you also have the possibility to report some measured data which you may have. Once you are done, you generate your CSR. Also the information on use description and exposure assessment is exported to Euclid. Your CSR is attached to Euclid and submitted to ECHA, where it goes into the database, and ECHA and the member states can access the information. A little part of that is, of course, also disseminated to the public. And a very important step also, to communicate also to the downstream users, you generate your exposure scenario for communication, which you can do in a digital format. You can also make a Word document, PDF document, and then you send that to your downstream users. So that's how the whole IT workflow fits together. A little bit about why to use Chesar, and then we will go into the exercises. First of all, important point in Chesar is that it enables you to work consistently. So you have consistency between Euclid and Chesar, which means there cannot be a discrepancy between the substance properties and the uses which you have reported in Euclid and what you put in your chemical safety report. There are checks when you're generating your chemical safety report that the information is still aligned. So it's easy to keep that consistent. The same is true for the information that you put in your chemical safety report versus the information that you send down the supply chain. It both comes from exactly the same assessment, so the information will be the same. and consistent with each other. So this consistency is an important added value. Then standardization. As you saw a little bit already, we have quite a standardized workflow. You go through the boxes one by one and you do it in a standard way. The possibility to use maps is important because the assessors will receive already the right use descriptions and conditions of use from their direct downstream users. So these use maps contain already the information on the conditions of use as they happen downstream. All the assessor has to do is upload the information, which he can download from a single point of access. Another important part of the standardization is the use of possibility to use standard phrases, which also enable, for instance, translation of the exposure scenarios. The chemical safety report format is generated always in the same way, so that's a standard format, and the same is true for the exposure scenario for communication. There are a few things which you can change, but in general it always looks the same, which means if a downstream user receives an exposure scenario from company A using Chesar or company B using Chesar, they will at least have the same structure and make it easier for them to read. Then there are some benefits to enable efficient use. As I briefly explained before, there's the possibility to reuse information across substances. So if you have done your assessment for one substance and you have another substance which has similar properties and similar uses, you can reuse that information. The efficiency also comes from these integrated exposure estimation tools, which are automatically calculated for you. Then there is a possibility to conduct bulk actions. For instance, if you want to change the concentration of a substance in a mixture for all the life cycle stages after formulation, you can basically do that with a few clicks instead of having to go to each of them separately. So you can do that at substance level, exposure scenario level, or for groups of contributing scenarios. There are different ways to perform these bulk actions. Of course, very efficient is also that you can generate your chemical safety report and your exposure scenarios with just one click. No manual editing in Word, and also the possibility to export in this XML format. And last but definitely not least, Chesar helps you in updating. Because everything is in a database format, so if there is new information, it will automatically recalculate for all the plugged-in exposure estimation tools. So if you change your vapor pressure, all the isotoc TRA will be redone to show the results for the new properties. And also you can easily add a use, and then it will just be integrated in your life cycle tree. But enough about those benefits. Let's actually go and do something ourselves instead of just listening. Shall I just do this intro and then you take it from there? So in front of you, you have a nice package of paper with the exercises which we're going to be going through, which are basically divided in these subjects. It's also what you saw in the agenda. So we start with the communication with Euclid, box 1. Then we do the use description, then environmental, worker and consumer exposure assessment, and as last two steps, the generation of the CSR and the exposure scenarios for communication. We will, in just a minute, switch your screens so that you have a desktop installation in front of you, which should have all Euclid and Chesar installed. And then for the first exercise, we will actually go through it together, so at least you all have the substance ready to be assessed in Chesar. We have step-by-step instructions for you to go through. There are some you will see which have optional. They are in italic and they're always really at the end. Those are for those people who are very fast and are looking for something else to do. Don't worry, you don't need to do them to be able to follow. So as long as you do up to the optional, it's fine. And as Roberta already said, we have a big team of colleagues. We are all here to help you while we go through the exercises. So if you run into any problems, just let us know, and we will come help. So, up to the first exercise.
So now we have to start. So Eleni, if you can switch, you will see. Okay. So this is my desktop, but I assume that you will. Okay. Is that if they see my desktop, they can't do the stuff.
Ah.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So
we have to.
this. Okay, so you should have your own screen appearing in a while. Okay.
Passwords.
Some of the
Password.
PCs are locked, so in order to unlock them, you need to enter a password, which is password with capital P, and then 1, and then exclamation mark.
Yeah. So password to be entered if you have a black screen or blue screen, I don't remember. So it's capital P, password, then 1, and exclamation mark. So I write it here, like that. The password that you have to use to enter the PC. Not for Chesar, it's just for you to... So we tried to set all the PCs for you, but then they went to sleep nicely. Good for them. So password 1 exclamation mark. If you did manage to have the password 1 exclamation mark, you should have something like this screen on your PC and the Euclid one. Did you manage to have, all of you, a white screen, or at least something whiter than the previous one? Okay. So if you are ready, we can start our demonstration by assessing the Chesar. If it's not yet accessible for you, the default username and password are admin. Okay? Do you have the same screen as I have? That's great. We start in a good way. Now, the exercises, so the exercises that we will be doing together as a spatial stuff, let's say, are the exercises belonging to the communication with Euclid and scope of assessment, so the very first pages. And we do it together so that it will give you the possibility to start immediately with Chesar from the next package on, okay? So we are sure that everything is fine. So first of all, to work with Chesar, you need a Euclid file, right? You need a Euclid substance because you have been working for the other, you have been defining the other assessment in Euclid, you defined all the properties of the substance in Euclid. So what we have to do now is to open Euclid. Can you? There should be something like an icon on the bar at the ear below. You should have something like this one. Okay? Do you have Euclid open? If you have it, you go to the home page of Euclid, which is the little house here. Of course, from tomorrow on, the ones that are following the Euclid training, you will get everything. So this is just because we need the substance in Euclid, okay? So you need to import your substance in your Euclid, which is an empty application at the moment. You add files here, add files. And on your desktop, you should have something like Chesar training files, right? Okay, you click on that, and you should have Chesar files for training and getting started with Chesar files. On your desktop, so from Euclid, add files in the import assistant. It's okay? So we go inside the getting started with Chesar files. Getting started with Chesar files. I'm sorry, the resolution is a bit small, maybe for you. So getting started with Euclid files, and you pick the SECHA training substance. Once you have it, you double click on it, and then you click on it, and then you click on open. Okay? Then you click on finish. Sorry? Yes. So again, we have imported the substance, add files from the desktop. Don't worry, this is the worst part of the exercises. Then the rest will be very, very, very smooth because you will have your PC already set, everything there. So it's just this one, and we have to set it for you, I'm sorry. So we need you to set it. Is this okay? Can I ask you if you managed to import the substance in Euclid? Or the ones that didn't, didn't manage that we can help? So everybody has the substance in Euclid. Well done. I hope to have it as well. Okay? Now, you go to Chesar. Okay? In Chesar, now we have to set up the connection with Euclid, which is very easy because you just have to click Import Substance Dataset via Web Service. You click on this one. I'll show you again. This one. Is it okay? So, are we there. So import Euclid substance with dataset via web service button. You click on this. Is it? Okay. Then you click on search. And you should have your substance to be imported. Search. So you should have something like that. Is it? Oops, sorry. Everything is, in any case, written in the manual. Eh? If you are quicker, you can go through the manual. Eh? Okay? Oh, start sweating. If you're ready, you can import the substance by clicking on the little icon here. Okay, you can import it by clicking on the import stuff, and then you will have something like a green. So you should not care about another substance that might be inside your Chesar. What we need to have is the Chesar, the SECHA training substance. Okay? Did you manage to import it? Okay. If you have any problem, just please raise your hand that we will come to your place and try to help you. Okay? Done? So, now you go to the box 1, and your substance is inside your Chesar. Okay? Now we have to do another bit of setting so that you will have your Chesar ready to be used for the full training. And what we have to do is to first import a legal entity in Chesar so that you will be able to create library items. You will see, the condition of use you will be needing for the assessment. Can we do it together? So we have to go to box 6. Box 6 is really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Sorry, not box 6, 7. So the last one, the one with the persons there. Box 7. So we go to the tab, Legal Entity Management. You click on that. You click again on Import. Oops. you go somewhere to pick your stuff. You go to the file. Again, getting started with Chesar files. You double-click, and you pick the Training LE, Training Legal Entity, Training LE. Is it okay? Okay. I'll click on it, and now I have my training legal entity inside my legal entity management tab. Okay? Are you at this point? Okay, great. Then we have to go back to user management, so the other tab. You click on this little username with a link. You click on this. And here, under the legal entity, you have to pick the only one that you have because we have imported just one. Okay? So I repeat, cancel. I will, from here, so user management tab, users, username, admin. You click here, and you assign to the user, to the default user, the legal entity that we have just imported. Okay? And then I save. And it's done. Whew, another piece. We need another setting, and then we are done. Okay? So, the other setting that we need to ensure is the import of the ESCOM standard phrase catalog. So we go to the box 6, the one with the wheel. Up. There are 2, 4, 5 tabs. You pick the last one with standard phrase. You click on it. You click on import. And you should have, by default, the folder already opened with the ESCOM phrase catalog 3-1 version, Chesar file. So you open this, and you overwrite all existing. It's okay. Okay. So as you can see from the message, now you have imported 2,500 standard phrases. Those standard phrases are coming from the CEFIC website. They have transformed the standard phrase in Chesar, and the file, the Chesar file, is available on the CEFIC website. On your package, you have the information where to find it if you don't know. Okay. And congratulations, because you managed to set properly your Chesar to start with. So, just for your confidence in the, in the training itself, so this part is for everybody the most annoying one, because we are doing a bit in a rush, everything that should be done maybe along the time. So this setting is to be done only once in your life of Chesar for each version. So the setting up of the legal entity and the import of the ESCOM phrase catalog, I mean, it's something that you do once and then it's done. Unfortunately, we have to do everything at the same time now, and that's it. So now we have a user which has the possibility to create whatever, so all the condition of use, because it has the legal entity associated, Then we have the standard phrase catalog, and we have already imported the substance inside Chesar. What we can do now is to have a look at what Chesar has imported from the Euclid file. So we can go, as you can see here, we have in box 1, which is this one, we have some tabs. The first one is substance management, CSA management, substance identity, physical, chemical, fate properties, fate in standard biological STP, physical, chemical hazard, and hazard conclusion and scope of assessment. So all of these, it's related to the substance which is available for working. And you know that because here on the top, you have the information on which substance you are working with. So if you have selected substance, ECHA training substance, selected CSA default, you are perfectly in line. Okay? So if you go, for example, to the substance identity, you see that our Chesar, our ECHA training substance has a reference substance called ECHA substance. This is the CAS number. Of course, it's a bit of fantasy CAS number. Then you have the UPAC name, which is not really in the UPAC catalog. But anyway, this is what we have to work with. Then we have another tab, which is the physical, chemical, and fate properties, in which you have all the properties that Chesar has extracted from your Euclid file. Okay, so you have the physical form, molecular weight, boiling point, and blah, 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 blah. So you can revise or review yourself what is the information. And you have different tabs. So the first one is a general, so you can scroll it down. Then you have the biodegradation information, bioaccumulation, abiotic degradation, and absorption coefficient. Just to let you know, there is in Chesar, everywhere in Chesar, is plenty of these little nice question mark signs. Those are related to the help texts that we have targeted to the page in which you are. So for example, if I'm clicking that, now you see physical, chemical, fate properties, help is coming. And here you really find the information you are needing to know, let's say. So don't be shy. Use this button as much as possible, not only today, because today maybe you don't need so much, but when you will be at home, just use it because you might find some reasoning that you were not secure of or you were not thinking at. In this case, for example, in this help text, I have some information related to this little pen, this one, which is something that is enabling you to change value from the one imported from Chesar. But please use this information, these possibilities with carefulness, let's say. Because if you change this, for example, the physical form from Euclid to solid, I mean, you are changing really your substance. I mean, be careful on what you are doing, okay? This is, by default, what Chesar is giving you and what Euclid is giving to Chesar. And the suggestion is to leave it untouched. But if for whatever reason you need to change the value because maybe the endpoint is not yet finalized and you don't have the information, you can add it. But then be aware by the fact that Chesar and Euclid has to be always synchronized between them. So you will have, in any case, to rely and to use the information from Euclid. Okay? Then this will be maybe repeated along the training and overall when the CSR generation will be tackled. Okay, then we go to the fate in standard biological STP, and as you can see, the default is the uses setting in which the system is calculating for you the releases. You can change it by clicking on the specific setting, and of course you have to add your reasoning why you are changing and the information that you have for changing it, and add the explanation. In Chesar, the edit explanation is in this little bubble. If you click on that, you will be able to do whatever. But at the moment, we rely on the default usage setting, and we are happy. Then we have the physical chemical other properties. And then finally, maybe one of the most important tab is the other conclusion and scope of assessment, in which Chesar is already telling you something more about your substance, because he is doing something for you. For example, he is defining the risk characterization type depending on the information that is available in Euclid. Okay? So we have the environment, worker, consumer, and environment tab. If we stay in the environment, beside the PBT assessment information, again coming from Euclid, you have for each of the compartment for aquatic organisms, you have the other conclusion that comes from the endpoint 6 in Euclid, which is 0.01 milligram per liter with the explanation that has been entered in Euclid. So Chesar is reading only the information from Chesar, from Euclid. And then you have nicely the information on the risk characterization type. In this case, it's quantitative because we have a PNEC. Okay? So in case of PNEC and DNL, the risk characterization type is quantitative. So you will have to do a quantitative risk assessment for this compartment. Times to time, you have also the other conclusion from Euclid, which is no hazard identified, and Chesar is deciding for you that, of course, if no hazard is identified, you don't have to do anything with this compartment. Okay? Is it clear? If you have any question, just raise your hand, click on the button to get the microphone working, or just ask one of our colleagues. Okay, the same is for the worker, in which I wanted to show you just, for example, for the hazard violation route, we don't have any DNL information, but we have the other conclusion that is saying that is like low hazard, no threshold derived, and in this case there is no possibility to have a quantitative risk assessment, but you will have the qualitative risk assessment. Okay? Is it okay? Say yes. So this bubble is the explanation from Euclid. Usually in Chesar, so if you do not have anything inside this little bubble, which means it's white, there is no text. If it's blue, there is some text. Okay? For example, here, it's white because I have nothing. But as soon as I put something, save, it turns blue. So it's an indication for you where you have to look for getting more information. Are you happy? That's the first set of exercise. Congratulations that you managed to go through. There is an additional information, if I'm not wrong, which is a synchronization between Euclid and Chesar. You may want to do it maybe later on, as you wish. But at the moment, I feel, if you do agree with me, that we can go on with a short presentation of the box 2 functionalities that my colleague, Eleni, will, she was trying to escape. So I will set up the presentation. Okay? So that the work will be So this you can skip. You go. Okay, use description.
Okay, so now we will continue with our substance review. Okay, so now we will continue with the next step. Once you have imported your substance in Euclid, then you need to go to box 2 and start your use description. So, but first, in order to do so, you need to have a little bit of information about your substance, so the use profile of the substance, if it functions, for example, as a co-emulsifier or a weighting agent, etc., the volume of the substance in the market, the conditions that is used, and also maybe the concentration that is used in the different products. So once you have all the relevant information, then you can start describing the different uses. In Chesar, the use description is done in a life cycle tree structure that has basically 4 main stages: manufacture, formulation, the different end uses, such as the use at industrial sites, the widespread use by professional workers, the consumer use, and also service life. If your substance is incorporated into articles, then you need to create a service life stage. And there are 3 types of service life because your substance can be used or processed by workers at industrial sites, by professional workers, or by consumers. Then, while working in box 2, you should be aware of some key concepts. So the first one is the manufacture or import node, which is the starting node of the life cycle tree. So when you go back to Chesar and you click on box 2, then you will see that this field, it would be there. You cannot delete it. It would always be there, and it serves as the basis for calculating the tonnage to be assessed for this CSA. Then we have the use, which covers similar activities carried out by a group of actors in the market. For example, for the use of formulation, corresponds to the relevant activities in order to produce a mixture and then put it into the market. Then we have the contributing activities that cover the description of the different activities that contribute to one use. For example, the different unit operations or the different tasks that are performed by the workers. And for each use that you have added in your life cycle tree, then you need to create at least 1 contributing activity for the environment and 1 contributing activity for the workers or consumers. And then we have the tonnage to be assessed that corresponds to the tonnage that is imported and manufactured minus the tonnage that is directly exported or used as an intermediate. Then we have the use maps. They are Excel files that they have been generated by the downstream user associations. And they contain information on the uses and the contributing activities, and also information on the exposure assessment inputs for each contributing activities. So the exposure assessment inputs could be SWEDs, SCEDs, and SPECs. What are those? So for SPECs, for example, contain a set of conditions of use and the different releases to water, air, soil, and waste. And they are relevant for the environmental contributing activities. And SWEDs and SCEDs, they contain a set of conditions of use relevant for workers or consumers, respectively. and they need to be used for workers or consumer contributing activities. There are different ways to build up your life cycle tree. If you have already worked with Chesar, then you might have some life cycle trees already, and you can export the life cycle tree from one substance and then import it into another substance if it is relevant. By doing so, you need to bear in mind that what you have created before, if, for example, you have already started to build up your life cycle tree, and then you decide that, maybe it's better if I import the whole life cycle tree, then everything that you have done before will be overwritten by the life cycle tree that you're importing. But we will see how this is done in the exercises later on, so don't worry. The other thing that it's important to know is that when you import a life cycle tree, then you import information only on the uses and on the contributing activities, nothing else. But then, instead of importing a life cycle tree, you can import a use map. By doing so, you have the opportunity to import information not only on the uses and on the contributing activities, but also on the conditions of use, because as we see before, the use map contains information also on the exposure assessment inputs, that they are the sets of the different conditions of use. And also you import information also for the exposure scenario for communication. Again, we will see how this is done in one of our exercises for this box. So now you need to perform 4 exercises. The first one, you need to create only one use. Okay, so you will perform the exercises after the break. But just to give you a short overview, so in the first one, you will create a use and the relevant contributing activities. Then you will provide the general information, for example, of the use profile of your substance, and you will check how the assessed tonnage is going to be calculated automatically by the tool. And then you will import a life cycle tree, and you will see what is going to happen to the use that you have already created. And last but not least, you will have the opportunity to import a use map and check again what is going to happen and what information will come and report it in the box where you are going to perform your exposure assessment. But now we can have a short break, and then we will come back and we will continue with this set of exercises.
Just as a small note beside them before letting you go outside and having your coffee. So in the package that you have some, for example, for box 2, you have some background information. Then you have the exercises. So the background information is something that it's a bit long, maybe to be read today, but you are welcome to read. What we are asking you is maybe to give it a look whenever at home or during the flight home or whatever, because it gives you really the background for the box. So it's kind of interesting. Beside the exercise, you have sometimes also some boxes in which you have the notes, and those notes are quite interesting. So pay a bit of attention also at this part. I know that in a training you just want to have the step-by-step or really skinny information, but we decided to put everything in the material so that you can reuse that by yourself when you will be at home or at work. Maybe at work, better than at home. Okay, so the coffee break will last 15 minutes. 15 minutes? I think, 15 minutes. So if we manage to be back in the room around 11:30, would be perfect. If not, we will come and take you in. Okay, thank you. Enjoy your coffee.
Okay, so most of you have already completed this set of exercises. So shall we go and have a look all together? And for those that they have not finished yet, then just raise your hand and one of my colleagues will come and help you go till the end. Okay, so I will start with the first exercise. So in this exercise, we need to create a use. And as I have told you before, once you click on box 2, then you see the starting node. And if I right-click on the starting node, then you have the possibility to check all the options, all the actions that you can do. In this case, I want to create a new use. So I click on Add. And in the pop-up window, I select the use that I want to create. In this case, manufacture. So now I need to give a name to my use. And I can do that. I have two options in order to provide a name. So I can either use a free text, or I can use the standard phrases that they come from the ESCOM catalog that you have imported while you are setting up Chesar. But the thing is that I'm not aware of all the phrases that exist in the ESCOM catalog. So the first thing that I need to do is to search for the phrase that I would like to use. So in this case, first, by default, you can use free text. But if you want to search in the ESCOM catalog, what you need to do is to let the tool know that you want to use standard phrases. To do so, you need to click on the double arrow. And now you can see that I have this book. That means that the tool is going to search using the keyword that you are going to provide. So I need to put my cursor in the last line and then type the keyword. So now you will see that here I have all the relevant results, and I can choose the one that I would like to use. So I will scroll down, and I will select the one for manufacture. Then the next step that I need to do is to provide further description for this use. I can enter my text here. And then I need to assign the tonage for this use. In this case, is 320 tones. And I need to click on Save. Now you see that the tool informs me that the use has been created successfully. Now, the next step is to create the contributing activities for this use. Now, in this case, I click on the use, not on the starting node, on the use. And again, I select Add. And in this case, I have only two options, to create either a contributing activity for the environment or for the workers. So the first step is to create one for the environment. Okay. Now I also need to give it a proper name. And here I see that I need to enter information about the closed system and that it takes place under a dry process. So let's see if I can find something relevant. Okay, I have a phrase for closed system, and then let's see for dry process. Yes. And then the next thing is to assign a relevant environmental release category, the so-called ERC. And for the use of manufacture, we have only one available, which is ERC1. And then click on Save. Is everything clear so far? Any question? Okay. Then you need to do the same for the contributing activities that they are relevant for workers. So I will create one of them. Again, now I click on Worker Contributing Activity, and I need to search for a relevant phrase for its name. Let's see if I find something. Okay. First I need to say that I want to use standard phrases, my mistake. So I click on the double arrow, I have the book, and now I need to search if there is something in my catalog. Okay, as you can see, there are no results, so that means that the phrase that I'm looking for does not exist in the catalog. So what I need to do is to click again on the double arrow, and now I can enter the name of my use as free text of my contributing activity. Sorry. Okay, and then the next step is to assign a process category, because now we are in a workers contributing activity. And the relevant one for this example is proc1. And then I click on save. And you had to do also, you had to repeat this step in order to create another contributing activity for proc28. Everything clear? The exercise one, everybody has done that, right? If you want to create more than one contributing activity for workers, then you need to create a new one and then assign the correct process category. So, for example, in the training material, you had to create 2 contributing activities, and then in the first one, you assigned a process category proc1, and then in the next one, process category proc28. And if you want to create another one, then you need to create a new contributing activity. Okay. So let's move to exercise 2. And this is about the starting node. So I click on manufacture and import. And let's see what we can see in this view. There are some fields where you can enter information, and those are the donuts imported, donuts directly exported, and donuts used as intermediate. Now, based on the information that we have, our substance is not imported, so there's no need to enter any information here. We do not export it, and it's not used as an intermediate. So it's fine that we have the zeros. And then here, you can see that there is information about the donuts, about the manufactured donuts, but you cannot edit this information, so it's a read-only field. And this information, if you haven't noticed, it comes from the information that you have imported when creating the use of manufacture. So if I come here and then change the number, click on save, then you will see that this number here has changed. And if I click again, then you will see that I have 300 instead of 320. So there is a link. Now, assuming that I have some tons of my substance that have been imported, let's say that I have 50 tons. And then I want to enter information about the use profile of my substance that will be later on communicated in the CSR. This piece of information should be entered in this field. I will not write the whole part, but in reality you should provide all the information that you have. And now, let's see what will happen if I click on save. So now you see that the donuts assessed has changed and has taken into account the information that I have provided here. So if you remember during the presentation, we said that the donuts to be assessed corresponds to the donuts manufactured and imported minus the donuts exported and used as intermediate. So if I change the numbers here and then click on Save, then the tool will do the calculations and will provide me with the donuts to be assessed for the CSA. Is this clear? Okay. So I will remove this and save. In order to have the same information, I will go back to the original values. So now we will move to exercise 3. That's about importing a life cycle tree. To import the life cycle tree, you need to click on this button here. And then you need to select the relevant Chesar file. Open. So let's see what's going on. Okay. So now I have imported the life cycle tree, and you have those two buttons here. It's called Collapse All and Expand All. I will click on the Expand All button, and now you will see all the information that has come from the life cycle tree that I had just imported. So I have a use for manufacture, another use for formulation, and a use for consumer uses. I have not created the second contributing activity for the manufacturer use, so you cannot see that there is a difference. But you have created two contributing activities for workers under the use of manufacture. And then you saw that when you imported the life cycle tree, you had only one for the environment and one for the workers. That means that when you import the life cycle tree, all the actions that you have done before are overwritten. So you need to be careful when you are importing the life cycle tree. It's better to start with the import and then create new uses, for example. Any question about the import of life cycle tree? Okay, the most important thing is that it contains information on the uses and on the contributing activities. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the use maps. So now I click again on the starting node. And instead of clicking on Add to create a use, I will select this option, Import a use map. And I'm going to select the correct file. So now I have imported a use map. Here you can see it has been added to my life cycle tree. And if I expand my tree, you can see that my use map has come together with all the uses and the contributing activities. But I need to take care of the information that the use map contains, because not all the information might be relevant for my substance. So what I need to do, so first I need to move the use map one step down, because my substance first is manufactured, then it goes to the formulation stage, and then it goes to the end uses. So, and since my use map contains end uses, I need to move it one step down, so below formulation. And to do so, I click on the use, and I select Move Down. You can do this in any use that you have created in your life cycle tree. For example, if I click on Manufacture, then you still have the option to move it up and down, depending on what you would like to do. So now it's in the correct order, and the next thing that I need to do is to adapt the donuts for the use map. I have information that from the 320 tones that have been manufactured, only 200 tones goes into the paint market. The rest goes in another, in the lubricant market, which is out of the scope of our training exercise. And I click on Save, always. And something else that is important, each time that you import a use map, then you have this field here, Advice to Assessor from Use Map. So when the use map developer has created the use map, he or she has entered some information in order to help the assessor to use the use map correctly. And this information should be reported here. So when you are going to use a use map, please pay attention to the information that is reported in this field, because it should be really useful for you. Then the next step is to delete the uses that they are not relevant for our substance. In this case, I need to delete the use, the industrial use of powder coatings, because our substance is an additive with technical functions for liquid products. And as you can see here, I cannot see the whole name of my uses, but I can either click on its use, or you can move this bar here, and then you can see the whole use. So if I click on the use, right-click, sorry, then you also have the option to delete it. And by deleting a use, that means that you are going to delete also all the contributing activities that they are created under this use. So I delete it. And now my use map contains only the uses that they are relevant for my substance. Then I need to adapt the information for its substance, for its use. I click on the use at industrial site, and I need to change the information about the tonnage, so it should be 100 tons per year. And to report the information about the technical function. So in this field, let's see if it exists. Okay, it exists. And I would like to enter something that is not already in the list, so I click on Other. And here you see that I have a new field where I can enter information about the other technical function that I would like to report. Co-emulsifier. Okay. And now I click on Save. So now you see that the value has changed from 1 to 10. You need to remember to click always on Save each time that you do a change. Something else that I would like to mention is that you also have this yellow pop-up here. It says that show additional fields relevant for use description in Euclid. If you click on this, so by default you can see only those fields, but if you click on this checkbox, then you see that I have the opportunity to enter information in more fields, and then this information will be reported into Euclid once I export my uses. Any question about the exercises or the use maps? Everything clear? Okay, well done. You have made it for exercise 2. So now it's time to go to the exposure assessment. And Connie will introduce you to the key principles. Somebody to change this.
No, I will.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so before we go to a very well-deserved lunch break, I would like to start by just giving you a general overview of box 3. If I take the right mouse, that will help. Yes. Okay. So we finished importing the substance. We have a substance which we want to assess, and we finished in box 2 creating our life cycle tree. Now the next step we do is we go to box 3. And there are a number of things which I would like to show you here before, after the lunch break, we go into the environmental, worker and consumer assessments. So this is the first view of box 3. And you see here immediately on the left the same life cycle tree as that we had before, right? So the one that we made in box 2 is visible also here in box 3. This life cycle tree has, as before, the possibility to expand and collapse, like we saw. And you see that all your exposure scenarios and your contributing scenarios are visible here. You also see here on the left some icons. Most of them are still red with an exclamation mark, which means that the risk is not controlled yet for that contributing scenario. Some of them are question marks. That means that there is no assessment yet, or it cannot be concluded. And we also have one which is already safe, which is this one, where you see this green check mark, and that indicates that the risk is controlled. So when we go into box 3, you have, well, I have now opened one at use level, so I will start by telling you about this. This is the possibility to select whether the activities take place in a rigorously contained system. And there are 2 checkboxes here. You can have a rigorously contained system with minimization of risk to the environment, so that you would use if there is minimal release to the environment. And you also have rigorously contained system with strict control for manual intervention. So that's the one which you would use to say that the worker scenarios take place under rigorously contained conditions. If you tick one of these boxes, you get a warning saying that if there are spurks assigned, they may be lost. Okay, for now. And then you see that this new box also appears where you can describe the non-technical means for that strict control. As always with these little bubbles, you click on it and then you can enter some text. So you can tick the box for the environment, for the worker, and then put the explanation. I won't do that now because we don't have any of those. But just so you know, if you have some uses which take place under rigorously contained conditions, then you can mention that here. And it's a way to let the authorities know also that there's not so much cause for concern because there is very minimum release or exposure to environment and to workers. Of course, you need to put a proper justification. You can't just say that like that. There is also a field here saying explanation on the approach taking for the exposure scenario, where you can provide some general information on the approach you used. And this is all at use level. So for this industrial use of liquid coatings and inks, you can provide some comments here in this bubble if you want to. That's a little bit of a sidestep because the most of the work you are doing in box 3 is actually at contributing scenario level and not at use level. But be aware that there are also some things which you can do at use level. So let's now go to a contributing scenario. And you see on this right side this screen popping up. And this basically looks sort of the same. It has the same build-up in every contributing scenario, although there are some small differences between environment and worker and consumer. Let me start by just closing this so that you can see that there are actually 4 sections. So you see that you can expand and close these with this little button. You see I'm now in an environmental contributing scenario. I have 4 sections here. First of all, conditions of use. then releases, then exposure estimates, and then daily intake via food item estimated by EUSIS, which is the environmental built-in exposure estimation tool. For the environment, we have these 4 sections. Let me just go to a worker to show you the difference. It's a bit more simple. We only have the conditions of use and the exposure estimates. So for the environmental, we have a few more headings for specific parts. Okay, now, first of all, we have this conditions of use, and this is where you describe how the substance is handled at the site, for instance. You see that there are already some conditions of use in here. These are automatically in Chesar already when you have made your life cycle tree, and they're what we call built-in conditions of use. So they're part of the program. For environment, you can see them here. So we have information on the use amounts, both the annual and the daily use amounts as we are at the site. Then there is some part about the biological STP settings. There is one about waste, and there is one about the receiving surface water flow rate. Every time you create a contributing scenario, these will automatically be there in Chesar. Now let's have a look for these conditions of use at a worker, and you see again there are some already there. Of course different, because for worker scenarios you need to describe your conditions of use differently than if you're dealing with an environmental scenario. So you see here we have the percentage of the substance in the mixture or article, physical form, the duration of the activity, general ventilation, place of use, and operating temperature. Again, these are the built-in, which are always present from the start. Just to show you all of them, this is a consumer. That's a very small number of built-in conditions of use. You see we only have the percentage there. Okay, so about these conditions of use. So the first thing you need to do when you go into your assessment in box 3 is to define your conditions of use. There are different ways in which you can do that. First of all, and that's the default if you haven't imported the use map, you can base them on a manual selection, which means you can add new conditions of use by clicking on this button, and then to be able to add a new condition of use, you will also need to maybe make it in box 6. We won't go into the details of that during this training, it's a bit more complex, but the optional exercise at the end explains a little bit on how to do that. So if you don't have input, for instance, from a SPERC in this case, then you could add your conditions of use manually here. There are also more than just this standard set of built-in conditions of use already available in your library, which you can also use. The other option in case of an environmental is that you base your conditions of use on a SPERC. Once you do that, your conditions of use will be fixed according to the input that the sector has provided. And we will see that coming back when we do the exercise. We have one which is based on a SPERC. For the workers, it's quite similar. You can choose manual or you can choose a SWED, which is the equivalent of the SPERC, but then for the workers. So again, your sector association will have provided these conditions of use for you. And for consumer, we have the possibility to manually, the SCAD, which is also coming from your downstream sector, and there we also have the possibility to select a TRA consumer's product article subcategory. I think we will also see that come back in the consumer exercise. So for now, I will leave it at that. Okay, let me see. So enough about the conditions of use section. Let's go down to the next one. The next section, only in the environmental scenarios, is the releases. And here you will see the releases from that use to the environmental compartments, so to water, air, soil, and waste. You can base your release estimation, again, on a number of options. By default, it is set to ERC based. And then you also have the possibility to define an estimated release factor. So for instance, based on sector knowledge, you know that the release is lower than this ERC. You also have the possibility to enter a measured release rate. So for instance, you have measured that 1 kilogram per day goes to the STP, then you can enter that information here. You can also base your releases on SPERC. That is done automatically when you have attached the SPERC here at the top, then this will be changed to SPERC based, but we will see that come back. Okay, so that's the releases section. Then once we know the releases, we can have exposure estimates, which is the next section, and this one is also in the workers. So for the environment, it looks like this, and for the worker, you have also, you see here an exposure estimates section. Now I don't have anything here yet because I didn't add the SECHA TRA data sets yet. We will do that later on. Okay. Let's see. What else can I show you here? You see that here I have an EUSIS data set, so that's the built-in environmental exposure estimation tool. I can also add an external tool data set. So if I have used another program, I can enter the data, or I can also enter measured data. We will see this come back in one of the exercises as well. And for the worker and consumer, it's basically the same. So we have the possibility to add the TRA workers, which is the built-in exposure estimation tool. We also have the possibility to report something from an external tool and measure data. You see here also a button which enables you to import external tool data set. If the program that you have been using has an export functionality to create a Chesar file, this is where you can import that file. At the moment, ConsExpo, it has the possibility to create these export files, so you will be able to import those data sets directly into Chesar and not have to type the figures over manually. Okay. Let's go back to the environmental one, because there I have actually some exposure estimates. You see also that I don't only have exposure estimates, but I can also immediately see my risk characterization ratio. If it is below 1, it means that the risk is controlled, and you can see it with the green. If it's above 1, then the risk is not controlled, and I see it in red. So the goal in the end is to have all of these green. I can already tell you we will not reach it for all the contributing scenarios that you have in your life cycle tree today. But of course, that is what you would want to have before you make your CSR. Important button also to tell you about is this one, the exposure estimates information. It can provide you some very useful information on what is wrong, or whether everything is okay with your assessment. For instance, if EUSIS cannot calculate the exposure estimates because it's missing a vapor pressure, then I will be, by clicking on this button, I will be able to see that that's why I don't have any exposure estimates. Here, I don't have anything wrong, so I just see assessment successfully validated. But if there is any reason for missing information, then you can see it by clicking on this button. One last tab, which we didn't see yet here, and that's the risk characterization tab. So when you go into your exposure scenario or your contributing scenario, you enter in this release and exposure tab, which we just went through, but there is also a risk characterization tab. And here you see you have the overview on the risk characterization for the substance. You see here that the substance is not PBT, good. You see here the PNEC, if available, or the other hazard conclusion. There can be no hazard, so then there's no need to do an assessment. You see here what type of risk characterization is needed. For this one, we all have PNECs, so then the risk characterization is quantitative. you see the risk characterization ratio and again the flag whether the risk is controlled. For workers and consumers, you may also more frequently have qualitative risks to be assessed. For instance, skin irritation, eye irritation, things like that. You also need to go to this tab to be able to do this qualitative risk characterization. So you see I've now gone to workers, and you see that there are a few here which are said to be qualitative. Now here, Chesar cannot do the work for you. It doesn't matter what the exposure is, because you need to provide your own justification why this qualitative risk is controlled. So you will be able to set the flag here. Then of course you need to provide a justification why the risk is controlled. And you see that my flag is then set to green. I think that's the most important things. You see that the justification I just entered is coming here. It's one field for all the different qualitative risks. So if you have more than one qualitative risk to give a justification for, you need to make sure to cover it all in the same text box. And there is also here the possibility to have some additional remarks if you want. I think for a first introduction into box 3, we're done. The next step will be that we start doing an exercise on the environmental exposure assessment, but we will do that after lunch. So first of all, we get a bit of food, a bit of energy, and then we continue with doing the next exercise ourselves together. We have, let's keep it to a little less than 1 hour now. So we would like to start again at 1:45. And we will be also escorting somehow you up. Basically, we will go here left in the elevators and then up to floor 1, and that's where the canteen is. And don't forget to bring your wallet, as Roberta said before. And the badge. And the badge, yes. Otherwise, we will have strays walking around. This is just an overview of the exercises which we will be doing. So we'll have a look at the environmental exposure assessment. So having a go at the first parts of box 3. And here you can see an explanation. So first of all, you will refine one of the contributing scenarios for the environment by incorporating some own site data. Then you will have a look at what happens if you have imported a use map and there is a SPERC. And then we have a look at the review of the assessment for the aggregated uses, and also having a look at a summary of the assessment approach for the environment. Just a few examples of how you can refine your environmental exposure scenarios. Not a lot, but at least some examples. So go ahead, it's the third chapter, I think, of your exercises. And as before, if you have any questions, we'll be around to help you.
Yes, may I add just a small thing? So if you manage to do the exercises and you are finishing before the other ones, we invite you to read through the background document, the background information, so that you have a bit more the contextualization of the exercise. Thank you.
Are already in the next exercise, and others are still working very well on the exercises. To make sure that we have enough time at the end, I would like to wrap this exercise up with you. So, box 3, and then environmental assessment. The first exercise that you are asked to do, after I log in again, and select my substance, was to expand the whole life cycle tree, have a look and see that for this ERC1 we already have a data set, but that's not the case everywhere because some of the uses we imported were part of a use map, and for those the default exposure data sets are not automatically created. So to make sure I have those for all contributing scenarios for the environment, the first step we had to take was to add the default exposure data sets and then select uses 2.1.2, and now they have all been created. So that was the first exercise. You see that for these widespread uses for consumers and for professionals we already have the green check mark, but we still have a red one for this industrial use and this formulation and this manufacture. So the next step was to refine the manufacturing contributing scenario for the environment. And to do that, we had to change the STP from standard to site-specific and to set the applications of the STP sludge on agricultural soil to no. Of course, we only do this if we really have the information that this is correct. Okay, the next step was to adjust some of the releases in this releases section. As we have a measured release rate to water, we set this water to measured release rate. Now this field is meant to give some kind of a name, so let's say on-site data, and then we put here 0.1 kilograms per day. Then if we went on, we saw that for air, the standard 5% is applicable. For soil, the standard 0.01% is applicable. And for waste, which is the separate field here, we put 6%. And of course, we have to provide an explanation, which is provided in the text. And also for this measured release rates, it would be good also to add some explanation. So as soon as you deviate from these standards, it's always good to provide an explanation why you have deviated from that. Now let's have a look. And you see that now my RCRs are all below 1. So this one has been nicely refined. The next environmental contributing scenario we were having a look at was ERC5, which is one which we imported with the use map and actually already had a SPERC attached. But it doesn't. So that's good. So if, I think in all your cases it has a SPERC attached. I will see whether I can find it. There we are. So if it does not, it's a nice way to show you. You can, so if you say here SPERC, then you can select the SPERC that you want. There is only one in this case which is relevant. And here we are. I actually, the reason why it was not attached anymore is because before, in one of the exercises, I showed you these flags for rigorously contained. As this SPERC is not relevant for rigorously contained conditions, it removed it for me. So that's why I have to reattach it and why it didn't happen to you. So this is the screen that you got when you were doing this exercise. And you see here that you have some information about the SPERC, so that you can check that it's really applicable to your case. You can also close this screen so you have a bit less information and you can see more on one screen. And now you see that most of the conditions of use are read-only. I cannot change this. I can read the explanation, but I cannot do anything about it. Just a few things are editable. You see here the receiving surface water flow rate, for instance, and also these use amounts. So what I had to do here was adjust these use amounts. The daily use amount at site, let's have a look in this bubble. It says that this SPERC applies to a maximum daily use amount of 1 ton per day of coating. So that's the complete mixture. We know that the mixtures only contain 2% as the maximum of the substance, so we can put here 0.02 tons per day. And as soon as I leave that text field, you will see that my annual use amount is automatically recalculated, taking into account the number of emission per year, or use days per year, which is actually part of the SPERC. So in this case, there was 200 days per year in the SPERC. So this has been automatically recalculated. The daily use times 200 is the annual use. If you want, you can still put a different value here. But I will put it back to 4 for now. If we scroll down a bit in this one, we see that you have here also information on the selected sub-SPERC. And you see that at the moment I cannot make any choice. The selection has been done automatically. It can be, I mean, we have one SPERC, which for instance covers this industrial application of coatings, water-based scrubbing process, okay? But you may have different releases depending on the type of substance you have. So you can imagine you may have volatile substances, and then the release to air would probably be higher than if you have low volatile substances. So when making the SPERC, the sector association can make these different, what we call sub-SPERCs, depending on the substance properties. Of course, the substance that we're assessing only has one vapor pressure. So Chesar will check this vapor pressure, it will compare it to the ranges which have been entered in these different sub-SPERCs and automatically select the relevant sub-SPERC for me. Now it can also be that you have several sub-SPERCs where maybe these ranges are overlapping or it's not so clear, then you will be able to select one here. But in general, it will probably be selected for you depending on the substance properties. So that's what this thing about sub-SPERCs meant in the explanation. You see here that my estimation method has been set to SPERC-based. There's nothing I can do about it. There's no editing here. I can have a look at the explanation why it's that percentage. Also have a look at the waste. And here you see that just by changing these tonnages, I have also now some safe use here. Was this a bit clear, these refinement options? There are also still other ways to refine, but we don't do that now, but just to show you some of the possibilities. Now the next step was quite simple. It was just to have a look at the environmental assessment for aggregated uses. Actually, even though one of the contributing scenarios for the environment is not yet safe, actually the aggregated use is safe because only a small part of each contributing scenario goes to the regional. So that's why in any case we have here safe use. You see here we have the regional assessment, and here we have the assessment for all widespread uses combined. So all consumer and professional uses are all put together into one big one, and that's what you see here. For the regional assessment, if you want, you can also add measured data or an external tool if you have the information. The assessment for the widespread uses, you cannot change anything. It's just the one that is done by uses, the built-in tool. Okay, last step we had to do was go to box 4 to have a look at the summary of the assessment approach, which we can enter here in 903 and then all the way at the bottom. You see that there are some fields here indicated in orange. This just means that there is no text there yet. It doesn't mean that there always has to be text. Not everything that is orange has to be filled, but it can help you in determining where you have and you have not entered text. And you see here also this nice pencil indicating the possibility to change it. So here we had a nice story. We say save. And you see that it is saved and that the orange disappears. I can still edit it though. I mean, if I now think, okay, well, it should have said something different, I can go back and edit it. Okay, now we can see here that for the whole CSR, this is what it will look like. And then you also had the possibility to generate the CSR, but we will do that later on. I think that takes us through the environmental exercise. I won't show you the optional just to prevent confusion. But if there are any questions, we can help you with those. Okay, time for the worker.
Okay, and now, whoop, you are asked to go through the worker exposure assessment, and you have to do at least 4 exercises, then the 5th one, if you want to, you're welcome. So the first exercise you will see is very simple. You will have to create default SECHA TRA exposure data set. Then the second one, you will have to edit the condition of use in a given contributing scenario. The exercise 3, you will have to edit a currently existing condition of use for several contributing scenarios by using this so-called bulk mode. Be careful in reading and going through the steps of the exercise, because this is a bit tricky. You might end up with shuffling a bit too much your life cycle. And then as a 4th, you will have to enter a summary of the assessment approach for workers. So good luck, and okay, we will be around to help you. First exercises, you were exposed a bit to the exposure assessment for the workers. And as a first exercise, it was quite easy, the first exercise, because you had only to apply the default TRA to all the contributing activity. Just remember that when you are going from the box 2, so when you have to find all the information in box 2 and you are switching to the box 3, all the exposure estimates are empty. So you have to go through or to assign the TRA, if you want, of course, if you need it, the TRA workers 3.0 data sets. So you do it, and immediately the system is going through the full life cycle, and it's associating the TRA worker to all the contributing activity that you have defined in box 2 for the workers. Okay? Any question on that? I mean, it is applying the rules of the TRA as they are defined in the guidance. In the supporting manuals, in the background information for this exercise, you have also the links where to find more information on the TRA, if you are interested in. Okay. At the moment, just for your information, you see that there are some flags in the tree that we were giving a bit as a given, but actually maybe a bit of explanation also on the little icons. So this little triangle means that something is not controlled. There is a question, an exclamation mark in the middle of the triangle, so it means that something has to be done, some work has to be done. Then you have this other icon, which is the red one, in which you can see that for this specific use or this specific contributing activity, the work is fine, meaning that everything is controlled. For example, for the ERC one, you did it in the exercise before. And then you might have some other icon, and another icon that is appearing is the question mark with the blue black background that some of you has encountered in the exercise. When you have this blue one, it means that something is missing, for example, the TRA exposure assessment or data sets, okay? So a little bit on the icons. And actually, some of you were asking also the meaning of this little leaf and this little, what is, tool. So the meaning is just one for the environment, the leave, and the other one for the human health-related activity, so this tool. Okay, so we go to the second exercise that was edit condition of use in a given contributing scenario. So the exercise was asking you to go to the 8B. And in the 8B, you had to do some changes to the default value provided by the TRA. For example, the duration of activities by default is given for this PROC by the TRA, setting it at 8 hours. In our case, the activity is only for 1 hour, so we change it to 1 hour. You can put some explanation in the bubble if you want. Then the thermal protection is here, and it's set to, instead of the default no, it's set to yes, because we are doing in our places, we are having some thermal protection, so you go to the yes, chemically resistant glows, and you see that you have the thermal effectiveness, which are influencing the exposure estimates. If you go down there, you see that now everything is green. Before it was not. Maybe I need to show you, okay, let's go to the no for a second, and you see that the thermal is red. When I do something on my condition of use, the calculation of the TRA is reperformed so that you have the information there. Okay? So you might wonder why here the RCR and the flags are all green, but in the life cycle, this flag is still red with the question, with the exclamation mark in the middle. The reason is because you don't have yet finalized your qualitative routes. You see those other icons here. You have not finalized these qualitative routes, so that the use is not safe. The contributing activity is not safe. Okay? Is it clear? Okay, good. Then we go to the third exercise, the one that was creating a bit of panic in some of you. So the exercise is asking to, so I'll go back to the exposure, is asking you to indicate that after the mixing step that is available in the formulation, so right after this PROC 3, the concentration of the substance in the mixture is not anymore 100%, but is decreased to the 2%. And there is, so you can do this in two ways. One is opening every single contributing activities after the mixing step and set it manually to 2%. Or you can apply this bulk functionality, this bulk edit functionality, in order to do it in one go for a number of contributing activity. To do that, you have to, to click on the bulk edit in one, in the first, sorry, not, it's okay, to bulk edit. Okay. You see now that all the contributing activity with the 100% are listed and already pre-checked for you, because the system is just recognizing that for these contributing activities, you have 100%. So we said that we want to do the change, so to set to the 2% to all the contributing activity after the mixing step, which means that I need to not apply my change to the PROC 1, because it's under manufacture, not even to the PROC 8P, and not even to the PROC 3, the mixing. Okay? Then I go here, I change it. Instead of 100%, I change it, to the 2. To the 2. I put my explanation, whatever, because after the so you will be explaining why. And in this, at this moment, if I click Save, all the contributing activities that are marked here will have the 2%. Okay? right? And there is spraying, which is okay. Okay, save. But there is not, yes, it has been. Okay, so we leave the bulk mode and let's check. So the mixing is still 100% because I didn't touch, but let's see what's happening to the transfer of substance in blah, 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 in mixture. So it's 2%. We go to the PROC2, for example, and that's it. We have all the 2% all along the life cycle. So be careful in using the bulk functionality because it's a very powerful tool, but it may create a bit of confusion if you are not really keen on paying attention at what you are doing, okay? Remember always that Chesar is pre-selecting for you all the contributing activities that have the same values as the one that you want to change, okay? Question on that? No. Great. So we have the last exercise, which is quite easy. So you go to the box 4, and you want to indicate to report the summary of the assessment approach. So you go to the 904 here, and you put your reasoning under the related field. I think that this doesn't need any more explanation. Any question on the worker exposure assessment? So remember, when you are in doubt, click on the question marks, because the question marks usually they are helping you more than what you might think. And I know that it's not so common that you rely on the help online text. But in this case, for Chesar, pay attention also to that. Okay? So if you are okay and you are ready to continue, we are now switching to the consumer exposure assessments, and you will have another series of exercises that Eleni is going to present you. Thank you.
So now for consumer assessment, we need to do only 3 exercises plus 1 optional. So the first one, we are going to create an isotope exposure dataset. Then we are going to explore the button called Import External Tool Dataset and use information coming from Consexpo. And the last exercise is similar as what you have done for workers and environment. So you need to report information on the assessment approach in box 4. And the optional exercise is again setting the qualitative risk characterization, but for the consumer contributing activities. So you can start, and if you have any questions, then we will be around to help you. Okay, so shall we have a look all together to the exercises? Okay. And now Roberta will take the control of your computer.
Sorry.
Okay. So let's have a look at the first exercise. I need to select the correct consumer contributing activity. So PC89 for waterborne paint. And I want to base my conditions of use on the specific TRA consumer subcategory. So I click here and I select these options. And now I need to select which subcategory I would like to use. So waterborne, the first one. And as you have noticed, now I have not only the default conditions of use, but additional ones, and they are, the values are already filled in. So the next step is to add the TRA consumer dataset for this contributing activity. And I can do so either by clicking on Add New Exposure Dataset, and then the dataset would be added only to this contributing activity. But I can do, as you have done before, by clicking on the Add Default Exposure Dataset, I will select TRA consumers, and then I will have the TRA consumer dataset to all the contributing activities. But for now, I will follow the instructions as you have done. So I will add the TRA dataset, and then I would like to refine the concentration for this contributing activity, because I know that in consumer products do not contain more than 1% of my substance. So I will go here and I will change this information, and then I will click on Save. Yes, before clicking on Save, I'm sorry, I can enter information why I have done this change in order to be consistent and transparent. The other thing that I would like to show you is that, as you have noticed, once I have selected the TRA consumers product, I have the option to edit only some of the conditions, only one condition of use in this case. So in this respect, the TRA subcategories are more or less similar to the sketch, sweat, and specs. You can modify only a few conditions of use, not everything. Any question about this exercise? Okay. So let's move on to the next one. So for the next PC9. Okay, so for this contributing activity, I would like to use the dataset that I have exported from Consexpo. It is possible to export Consexpo files in a Chesar format, and then you can import those into Chesar. In order to do so, I need to click on this button, and then I'm going to select the file. I have some information here about what has been already reported into Consexpo in order to make sure that I'm going to use the correct file into the correct contributing activity. And now, as you can see, I have additional conditions of use that are also filled in with their values coming from what I have used in order to create my file in Consexpo. And you can see the difference in the format. As Connie mentioned before, the ones that they are bold are the built-in conditions of use that they already exist in the Chesar library, and the new ones are, and the ones with the normal format, they are the Consexpo relevant ones. Now I will adapt the information about the exposure estimates, taking into consideration the information that is explained in the R15 guidance. And in order to modify the exposure estimates, I need to click on this link, and then the whole dataset would open. And here you will see that I have information only about the inhalation exposure and the dermal exposure. And what I would like to do is to divide this number by 2, because you can adjust the assessment of the long-term exposure if you have information that the daily exposure is less than 24 hours and if the exposure occurs for only a few times over a short period of year. And in this case, you have the information coming from Consexpo that the event duration is only for 132 minutes. So if you go to the R15 guidance, then you will see that for this amount of time, the the factor that you you can divide the exposure by a certain factor, and this factor is 2. So I will do the change. And in order to be more transparent, I will go and add the oral exposure and set it to 0. And something about this field. Here you can see that some of the information that I have used in order to calculate my exposure in Consexpo is reported in this field instead of being added as conditions of use. It's because not all the information that Consexpo needs are translated conditions of use. So the rest of the information is imported into Chesar, but they are reported in these fields. And also here you can also add the information about the change that you have done for inhalation. So I divided my exposure by 2 because of the information that exists in R50 guidance, and then you can provide your explanation. I click on Save, and now you will see that I have the adjusted value and also the one for oral. Is everything clear? Any question about the importing external tools datasets? Okay. And then the last exercise is about reporting the summary of assessment approach for consumer. So you need to do what you have done already for workers and the environment. So I click on box 4, and then here, and I can enter the relevant information in this text, which would be reported when I generate my CSR. Any question about the consumer assessment? No. Okay, then we can continue. And we will see how we can generate the CSR.
Yeah, there's not really much for me to introduce here, but basically all the hard work is done now. So we just have 2 small steps to actually communicate the results of what you have been doing, both in your registration dossier and to your downstream users. And the first of those we will do now. So you have some exercise to generate the CSR sections 9 and 10. Then we have an exercise on exporting the uses to Euclid to make sure that everything is synchronized. And then after you have done that, you can generate the full CSR. Now we have to give you back your... I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you again. So don't worry if you didn't finish. But just so that you all can see how it should be done. Just a quick demonstration of this exercise. So the first thing we had to do was to have a look at this editing functionality, and we had a look at that by going to this ERC1 and editing this explanation for CSR. You had a nice thing to put in there. I will just type something short. You see that it is updated here, and just to check, because all these have a corresponding field in the boxes before, I will go back to box 2, and you see that my misspelled explanation is now here as well. I can correct it here. Save, and then if I go back to box 4, the updated version will be here. So these boxes are always linked. Where you change it in the one, it will automatically be updated in the other. Then the next step we had to do was to generate CSR sections 9 and 10. I think you all managed to do that, so I will not show that here, but it was this button. Then the next step was to make sure that everything is aligned with Euclid, and for that we wanted to export the uses to Euclid, so I will do that. I say the first option, I think, yes. You see here that there is also the possibility not to include the exposure information, but we leave that not selected. I say OK. And then we have to do a bit of waiting. There we are. And then we are in Euclid. Now, it may happen that you don't see the result immediately, so it's best to just reopen the substance in that case. And if I now open 3.5, you see that, for instance, this manufacturer has been added. And you see all the information that was there, this nice description, the ERC one, the relevant proc, and all the contributing scenarios. So these are for the workers, for the environment, sorry, and these are for the workers. So then one more step to do, and that is the generation of the full CSR. And to be able to generate this full CSR, first of all, I need to supply a bit of extra content. And I do that by going to section 13.1 and creating there a record, which is the chemical safety report. I say that this is an own CSR there. And it's nice to also indicate here that we have used Chesar to make this CSR. And then the thing which I needed to create this record for before actually going to generate the CSR, because I want to have these fields of part A filled. So you see there is a summary of risk management measures, which I can enter. And there are two declarations. The first is that you have implemented yourself the risk management measures as specified in the CSR. And then there is one saying that you will communicate also the risk management measures to your downstream users. Don't forget to save. And with that done, I can now go back to Chesar and generate my full CSR. This is again the generate CSR, but then full CSR. Okay, I get this warning message, which is very important, indicating that I should make sure that everything is well synchronized between Euclid and Chesar before I generate the CSR. And then we have a little bit of patience.
Okay.
But in any case, believe us, you will get a CSR if you didn't see it before. And you will be able to nicely scroll through it and have a look at the contents, which should match exactly what you did in Chesar. Okay. I think we don't wait for this, and we... there it is. So just a quick glance, you see that in this section, part A, the things which I just entered in this Euclid record are mentioned. And then first of all, we get in part B all the sections 1 to 8 explaining the properties of the substance which come from Euclid. And then if I go all the way down, you see the sections 9 and 10 describing what we have done in Chesar, so the exposure assessment and risk characterization. I hope this was clear. Then we have one exercise to go. I hope you can bear with us for 10 more minutes as we explain the last but definitely not least important step of the process.
Okay, so the last set of exercise would be in box 5. So you should perform 2 exercises and then have a look in the last one, the optional one. and then you should check how to generate the default exposure scenario for communication and see how you can modify it either at the exposure scenario level or at contributing scenario level. So you can have a look, and if you have questions, let us know. Okay, so let's have a look all together at this last exercise.
Sorry, last time.
Yes.
Sorry.
So I will not exactly follow the instructions for this set, but let's have a look. So as I told you, there is an opportunity to modify the exposure scenario for communication either at exposure scenario level or at contributing scenario level. So at contributing scenario level, you can select or deselect the conditions of use that you want to communicate, and then you can change, or if needed, the text that you are going to communicate. You can do so. I will quickly show you. For example, if I want to communicate this condition of use, I need to click on this box, and then as you can see, I receive a message that there is no description for this condition of use. So if I generate the exposure scenario for communication right now, this condition of use, even though it is selected, it will not be communicated because the phrase is missing. So I click on the arrow, and then I enter the text that I would like to communicate. I save, and now you will see that I have this icon that indicates that I have done some manual changes in the conditions of use or in the phrases that I would like to communicate. At the exposure scenario level, what you can modify is to select or deselect this checkbox. So by doing so, you include or exclude information about the market. And you can also enter information, if you have some, about the scaling. So once you have done all the changes that you would like to do in the exposure scenarios, then you need to go here and click on this button. And then you will have this pop-up message that also allows for modification of the generated document. You can select one or some or all the uses. You can modify the formatting, and also you can select the language. So the one important thing is that if you want to generate the exposure scenario for communication, not in English, but in another language, what you need to do in advance is to import the translations for the standard phrases existing in the ESCOM catalog. So first you import the ESCOM catalog, and then going back to box 6, you, instead of clicking on import, you click on import translations. You import translations for language, for German, for example. And then when you click on German, then Chesar will generate the exposure scenario for communication in German, but only for the standard phrases that you have provided translations. So if you have used a standard phrase for which there is no translation in German, then this should be reported in English. And if you try right now to, not right now, when you go home and you want to play a little bit, then if you try to generate the exposure scenario for communication in any other language than English, then you will see that only the template is going to be translated and not all the information. So if you click on OK, then you will get the generated document. It will take us some time, so I will skip it for now. And then the other thing that you can do in this box is to generate the exposure scenarios in an ESCOM XML format. So again, you can select for which uses you want to get this format. And by doing so, yes, I have this message telling me that some of my uses have still the red triangle with a question mark. That means that I still need to do something. The risk is not controlled for all the uses. But right now we'll click on OK, I'm aware. And if I, what is this? I will do it again.
It's using InfoPath to open it. That's because it's trying to open it with a different.
Okay, but for those, yes, I'm sorry for this. So then you will generate a file that is not readable by human beings. I mean, it is, but it's easier to be read by an IT system. And then you can use this file into an IT system that can read this format and can generate the exposure scenario for communication. So basically, you can use this format in order to exchange information about the exposure scenario for communication between the different IT systems. So that's it. Do you have any question about box 5? It was a little bit... Yes.
I think there are some SDS software providers who have some translations. So if you have their software, then probably you can buy it. But we're not aware of any freely available translations at the moment.
Other questions? Yes, I know you're tired. So, before thanking you for being here today and being willing to learn a bit more about Chesar, we would like really to have quick feedback from you if you found this training a bit informative. If you had no clue before Chesar, now you know that Chesar is something, or I mean, this kind of very quick stuff, if you want. If not, there is a coffee outside. So, yeah, because we had a bit of fear when we were exposed to the number of participants that were up to, or almost 100 persons, that of course your background is very different, and so we designed the package, this package, in a way that it was kind of generic enough and to be followed by all the different persons. But of course we do not know, and now you have the possibility to say no, it was completely ununderstandable, or it was yes something, or yes we need to read a bit more at home, or it was completely irrelevant. I mean, well, we don't know. So if you would like to tell us something, you're welcome. And if you have additional questions, we are in the coffee break lobby, so just approach us with whatever questions you might have in relation to Chesar. Okay? Good. So thank you. So at the very end, we can thank you for your patience.